Well, I'm joined today by a very special guest. It's Neil Stubley, who's the head of, get this right, courts and horticulture for All England Lawn Tennis Club. Hi, Neil. How are you?
Very well, Scott. How are you? Very well.
Not too bad at all. I mean, it's the question we all ask now, and we take it more seriously than we used to ask it. So it really is, how are you, and how's the rest of the team, and how safe have everybody managed to be over the last 12 months?
Yeah, I mean, I guess in a way, because we're a hands-on sort of industry, we've had to come in and we're working outside. So there is a degree of normality, to be fair with the team. There's always that sort of nervousness about social distancing and doing the right thing, which we're constantly having to do and monitor and follow government guidelines like everybody else. But I think we had for 2020, believe it or not, we had a really good spring and summer. So we ended up doing a lot of the stuff that we were kind of being able to do outside, and we weren't stuck indoors too much. Obviously, this winter's been a little bit more difficult with lockdowns and stuff, and doing bare essentials and just managing and maintaining where we need to. But again, we've kind of turned that corner now. The days are starting to draw out again, and we're kind of getting focused now for the start of the grass court season.
Did COVID get close? Does any of the team go down with it? Maybe they'd be self-isolating or anything like that. Did you manage to keep away from that sort of thing?
Well, we're quite fortunate that we're actually spread over quite a big site. So we're a 42-acre site, and most of the staff at the club have been working from home. so we've got extra rooms and facilities. So we've come out of it really well. Really well indeed. We've had, I think, one person in the team that went down with it that had been, quite fortunately, had been away for a few days beforehand before he tested positive, and again his symptoms were fairly mild. So yeah, we've done okay out of it.
Did you feel the weight of responsibility being the manager to a large team to keep everybody safe, and what sort of mitigations and procedures have you put in place to make life that little bit safer for everyone?
Yeah, so we've just used extra rest areas that we'd probably use during the summer, and we've just sort of spread people out. So normally in the winter, we'd sort of revert back to one main mess room and all the team work out of one. And then in the summer, when we get our seasonal staff, we then start to spread and open up extra sort of bivvies and rest areas. So all we've done is since we went into lockdown last March, we've just kept all of those bivvies open, and we've just split teams up to sort of not mix. So we've had like different sort of rest times and lunch times, and we've just made sure that as safe as we can be with working practices. If we ever did get a situation where we got COVID in the group or people had to self-isolate, it was only ever going to be a small amount of the team, because we'd managed to separate them all. So yeah, we've been fortunate like that. And again, I think it's just a case of just staying a little bit grounded and just realizing the enormity of what's happening, out there, and just making sure that as long as each individual's taking responsibility and doing the right thing, making sure you're washing your hands and you're social distancing and making sure that we're doing the right thing, then in theory, everybody else should be safe, because if you're doing the right thing, then everybody is. So yeah, and I think it's just new ways of working, the ways that we haven't done before, that you have to keep taking stock of. You stop, you listen, you think about what you're doing, and then just kind of, because it's not second nature, because by nature we want to sort of gather in groups and socialize and stuff. So not being able to do that has been difficult as well.
Do you think many of the procedures that you brought in you'll retain when we get back to some sort of normality, the washing down the machines and all that sort of business? Do you think it's things that are that you've seen that maybe do have currency long term?
I think we've always been quite fairly good on that sort of thing. We've always had a good ways of working, I think, with cleanliness and working down and with machinery and stuff. And we're quite fortunate that the main area where we store most of our stuff is fairly recent anyway. It's within the last 10 years of being built, so it's quite modern anyway, rather than a bit of an ad hoc sort of area. I think some of the different ways of working, where you'd normally potentially do group talks in the morning about job lists and things like that, we've kind of done smaller groups and done sort of the day before, releasing it on Teams as a group chat about jobs for the following day, and then you can sort of liaise with the smaller groups and sort of, you know, just do different ways of working there, which I think, you know, will end up being slightly a part of the norm. But again, being a summer sport, being outside, it just means that a lot of the things by default that we do, you're socially distancing. You know, all the championship courts are individual courts. They're all hand cut, so there is the ability to sort of social distance and stuff just by the nature of the job, really.
Did you have anybody furloughed over the period, or did you have a full team throughout?
No, we pretty much kept everyone on. When we first went into the first lockdown, you know, for the first sort of month, the championships were still going to be on, so we were still gearing for that. And then within a few months, you knew that the club itself would be opening in again with on different tiers and restrictions and stuff. So we've been quite strangely a fairly busy summer with our members. You know, some of our, you know, members that might be working abroad or working a lot more than normal, that have, you know, probably worked from home, had a little bit more time on their hands, that have ended up, you know, driving to the club and using it a bit more. So we ended up having quite a busy summer with just members play rather than sort of tournament play. But again, some of the smaller tournaments obviously didn't happen as well through the summer as it sort of rolled through. So
I think very similar to the golf situation, that because golf was a sport like tennis, that you can play socially distanced, that it's seen a little bit of a boom. So in that regard, it's probably it kept the club buzzing a little bit. Maybe not so much the food and beverage in the locker rooms, but the courts themselves.
Absolutely, because you've got a net that divides everybody, it sort of forces you to social distance anyway. So it was just getting around the ways of how you pick up the tennis balls, and, you know, whether you'd put your own initials on the balls or you wore a glove. You know, the little things that different people brought to the, you know, how they wanted to play, just to sort of make sure that they stayed safe.
A bit like golf. I mean, the only big change is you can't touch the pin. So I've always putted with the pin in for the last 6 months, which is a small price to pay, but I'm sure it's cost me a few whole putts, I must admit.
And I think one thing I liked about seeing on Twitter is kind of all these new inventions of how to get the balls out of the cups and stuff. So again, by default, there's new ways of working and new sort of machinery and gadgets coming on the market that people just hadn't thought about in the past because they hadn't had to. You then rethink things, and I'm sure some of these things will be staying with us, you know, once we get this under control.
Now, I know you were the only Grand Slam played in a natural surface, so moving the date would have been virtually impossible. But did you get a bit frustrated that the other 3 Grand Slams managed to fulfill their fixtures last year and you guys didn't?
Not really. Again, it's one of those things that because we are a finite surface and we're a summer sport, there's only a very short window that we could have been able to move it in. And because as part of the championship planning, it starts quite early, you have to make it, sometimes you have to make that early call. And because we were kind of in the midst of it last year, sort of when the club made the decision early April that the championships wasn't going to happen last year, that was purely on the fact that you couldn't plan for it anyway, because it was that first wave, you just didn't know when it was going to stop. Whereas I guess for the other Grand Slams, because they could have that flexibility, it was slightly later in the year. The French were in a position that they could move it and still present their services. It just meant that they was in a position they could. But we was always going to have a very short window, and it was discussed about whether, you know, you push it back a week or 2 weeks. But again, back then when the decision had to be made, you couldn't guarantee that by pushing it back 2 weeks, you could guarantee the tournament. So there was no point delaying it when you didn't know what the outcome was going to be. And even now, you look at the Australian Open, you know, nearly a year after the pandemic started, they've even still got their challenges to sort of, you know, how they were going to deliver it and stuff. So I think it was, you look back and you realize that the decision that was made was the right one made, because the sort of the future was so uncertain that you just couldn't commit to anything back then.
I think you're right, but we all measure the start of summer, by Wimbledon. So we all felt it, but you guys must have felt it to such a more acute level, because it is such a big deal for you guys. It must have been a real downer for you and the rest of the team.
It was, and you kind of, and I think sometimes in adversity, you kind of find out how good a team is. And there was that that initial low for the first week or so that, the championship wasn't on, and all the hard work for the last sort of 6 or 8 months almost felt like it was to sort of no avail. But then all of a sudden it kind of dawned on us that, we still got the rest of the summer, and there could be, you just didn't know what sort of play you're going to have, whether it was just members play or some sort of smaller tournaments could sort of come in that we would normally have throughout a normal summer. So everybody was then refocused again, and we ended up having a very busy grass court season. We got to renovation stage. That renovation had to be just as thorough than it had been in the previous years, purely because we had to get ready for 2021. So it was a strange year, but again, it kind of it was one of those years where you could reevaluate how you felt about the championships. If you've been doing a lot of championships like myself, it would have been my 25th championships. To not have one, it just brought home how much you would miss it if you weren't involved in them anymore. So I think everybody's kind of is reinvigorated, ready for 2021. Having missed one, they're realizing how special they are and how much a part of our lives they've been, that I think everybody's even more determined this year to make sure that they're the very best.
So that gold watch for 25 Wimbledons will have to wait till next year then.
I was going to say, it's unfortunate. We'll have to wait another year, but there we go.